Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of My Little Black Book, the daily audio slash video slash podcast show slash whatever show where I talk into a mic for an indeterminate amount of time and you listen for some reason. Today I want to talk about Friends falling apart again. For context for my fellow Americans, France is currently going through another transitional government. So let me explain. You know how sometimes here in America, a politician will, step down in the middle of a session, or, let's be real, die of old age, or pancreatic fucking cancer, or some nonsense like that. And then they have to call something called a special election to basically replace him or her. The equivalent of that has happened again, but this time for their prime minister. France has something called a parliamentary system, which is like ours, like our presidential system. They technically have a president as well, but it's basically the presidential that they have is a stand-in for whatever a monarch would be in a normal parliamentary system. So it's they have a president who is the technical head of state, and then they have the prime minister who is the head of government. And the prime minister, who is usually ideally supposed to be supposed to be picked by the president, as a way to the person who's going to represent, the legal body. It's basically like the House Speaker to a certain kind of degree. The most recent prime minister he picked quit after a month. This is the third one in 5 years. So why is this significant? Well, during the last election, Macron and his party were saved by the left-wing coalition in France. Now, for those for those fellow Americans of mine who might not know a whole ton of France outside of baguette, white flag. Which, you know what, that's basically all you kind of really need to know, broadly speaking, when it comes to France. I can't even fault you for that. But, that being said, one of the things, at least for this episode, that you need to be aware of is that France has a very strong labor movement and civil participation rate. Whenever the government tries to, raise the retirement age or what have you, workers and, the general public come out on the streets and light Paris on fucking fire. France is one of the handful of nations in the world, and probably the only Western nation, where the government doesn't have, this is how it should be, broadly speaking, but rarely ever does it work this way in practice. But in France, it actually does work this way, where the government doesn't have a people, the people have a government. And so, when it comes to said government of France, they, generally speaking, listen to the general public as their, final common denominator. But that does not stop them from doing the same type of neoliberal slop that currently has the Western world, broadly speaking, descending into right-wing lunacy. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that Macron, like many of, Republicans here and the Democrats here in the United States, is beholden to the donor class. He believes that, the government should be in service to business and, help people and stuff, but absolutely will, the people should make the sacrifices first before any of the wealthy interests have to. It's part of the reason why he wants to, he cares about things like balanced budgets and, deficits and things of that nature. Financial policy wonkery that can be solved by raising taxes on the wealthiest people, but choosing not to because those people pay your campaign funds. Very similar to America, but unsimilar to America. The left of center coalition, which helped Macron pick his coalition, stay in power, and prevented Marine Le Pen's National Front, which she for all intents and purposes, she's basically French Donald Trump, for lack of a better phrase. She prevented her from winning the presidency, as well as helping them build a coalition government that basically forced out the right wing and prevented them from being able to do much of anything. The problem is that immediately after this, normally what you do in politics when people coalition build with you like this and, work with each other, you generally, make those people part of your government and you work with them. Macron did not do that. Lots of his contemporaries in his party spent months working with left-of-center parties and coalitions to prevent the fascist nationalist front from having any hope of being successful, and there were promises made to them in good faith that were not overtly insane or absurd or overreaching or giant capitulations to the left, as some people would call them. They were reasonable concessions that you normally make in coalition building in parliamentary systems. And Macron basically said, fuck off. And he has been doing this since then, and even before. As a result of this, his coalitions are falling apart, to the point where even his own party is calling for him to step aside and resign. It is genuinely madness. He is refusing to, partake in the political process as a good faith actor, because the donor class, his owners, do not want.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto New York 115 North.
Sorry about that. I'm currently driving. Like I said, I'm currently, or I didn't say it earlier, I said it in a previous recording. I'm driving to a jobs fair. That's an hour and a half away, hence why I'm doing this in the fucking car, so I apologize for that. Give me 1 second. But yeah, so basically Macron, didn't give positions that were promised to his left-wing coalition allies in his government. He didn't give them in European Parliament positions. All of these things are aspects of the things that Macron has done to sort of gimp, his domestic left-of-center allies. Now, granted, with things like the war in Ukraine and the Israel-Gaza situation, he has been able to sort of alleviate a lot of the local, a lot of the domestic issues that he has been dealing with because of his own, bias. But, even then, he has basically not been a huge help on the international front, and it really is just a level of capitulation to the wants and needs of his domestic constituents. Namely, more money to Ukraine, less money to Israel. So thankfully the French population is on the up and up. That being said, what has happened recently is, with his new prime minister stepping down, he has continued to railroad and roadblock very popular provisions, like, in ensuring, like strengthening the social safety nets. And in fact, he has even tried repeatedly to cut social safety nets in the sake of balancing the budget. Now, granted, let's be real, the types of people that want to balance the budget without meaningfully raising taxes on the highest corporations and wealthiest people in the country are just like they why are you trying to take the money out of working and poor people's mouths? There are more of us than there are of you. It is a recipe for disaster, and it is why there are currently there are likely to be more cop cars on fire in Paris again in the future. Ultimately, why am I talking about this, ladies and gentlemen? The reason why I'm talking about this is because this all feeds into a sort of political analysis that I have talked about at length, both in this podcast on HIMediaTV in general. And that is the sort of ineffectual failures of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism, for my friends and listening who don't know what it is, specifically, it is the framework of the Democratic Party, and was the framework for the Republican Party until about 2016. Neoliberalism being the incremental improvement of the average person's lives through policy wonkery and technocratic provisions, not doing anything particularly radical to shake the base, maybe adding some, fudging some numbers here, fudging some numbers there to make people's lives marginally, tinily better in ways that are mostly imperceivable, and realistically just being a good, quote-unquote, a good steward of the government and the economy in way of making sure that people are, quote-unquote, safe within reason without necessarily stepping on the toes of business in the markets to flex a bit. It is a perfect example for the last 20 years of domestic economic and social policy. It is the focus on rights of individuals and the focus of the government to not necessarily step on the toes of the business class while serving lukewarm and marginal increases to people, while also making sure that those increases to people's lives don't substantially affect or hurt businesses in any meaningful way at all. It is essentially feel-good politics on a social level, economic capitulation to the upper middle and upper class, the upper middle and upper classes, broadly speaking, and it is deeply unpopular, as you and I are aware. You have, when neoliberalism fails, a ideology that people have fought and died for, by the way, that has basically turned into sucking the cock of the rich and powerful. What this has essentially, led us to is a world where we are watching a rising of the right wing. We are watching the neoliberals continuing to do their thing of pounding down the left wing, because at the end of the day, as much as they love to prip and preen about social equality and the rights of humans and all of these great things, that is always going to be secondary to the interests of the business class. This is why you have Democrats who talk about, oh, we care about gay rights, we care about the rights of minorities and stuff, and then they will, suck the cock of Netanyahu and throw immigrants and the rights of trans people and the rights of immigrants under the fucking bus. Because ultimately, right-wing populism does not effectively step on the toes of business interests. Left-wing populism does. And that is why you see such a vociferous pushback from, Western countries, left of center or just center coalitions, trying to stamp out their left-wing flank as much as possible, while never fighting against the right wing unless we are in absolutely dire straits. This is why Donald Trump is resurgent, and the fascist MAGA wing of the Republicans is doing all of this evil shit. But to bring it back to France, you can see this same dynamic playing out. Emmanuel Macron is the perfect example. He is Barack Obama. He is a representative of a political will and establishment that does not exist as a popular part of the zeitgeist anymore, but still has an overwhelming amount of power and control over government itself, and is making choices like it still has a popular mandate. You cannot want to raise the retirement age to 70 and, cut social welfare programs for the sake of, improving, the physical state of the country, but not want to touch the profits of big businesses within the country itself. It is like 2008 to 2016, Democratic party policy on full display, and it is obviously unfucking popular, to the point where multiple people in Macron's party are begging him to step down and stop being the face of the party, because he is a physical representation of all of these political prescriptions that are just deeply unpopular. Even aspects of his own party has moved further to the left, while he has stayed largely the same. And it is just indicative of where we are politically as a species. Right-wing politics is resurgent because any left-wing alternative that is ultimately going to not only be better for people in the long run, from a standpoint of giving people the things that they need to live, that they and helping them have more security and get more personal wealth out of the work that they do at their day-to-day jobs. You have right-wing culture war talking points about trans people and immigrants that are exported from our country to the rest of the world, that end up being the linchpin and triggering morons' fear nodes in their brain that lead to this authoritarian hellscape we are seeing go across nation after nation in this on this planet. It sucks dick, and not in the good, fun, or empowering way. Ultimately, we continue, ladies and gentlemen, to be in hell. Anyways, that's another chapter closed on my little black book. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. If you liked this show, we have a ton of other shows. I did a pretty interesting piece on Taylor Swift yesterday, talking about kind of the death of her career, kind of doing the Kanye West thing of going on the alt-right pipeline, and sort of seeing her slowly start to be washed. But that's a whole nother episode. I don't want to spoil the surprise. I also have a bunch of other podcasts with tons of other shows that we produce here at HIMediaTV, which you can find at himedia.gg/pods, or wherever you get your pods. And if and only if you have the financial wherewithal to do so, the economy is fucked, so I completely understand. If not, check out our Ko-Fi. You can go to if you want to subscribe for $3 a month at HIMedia.gg/tip. You get a bunch of awesome perks and rewards service through our Discord, which you can join at the community link down below, which you absolutely should join, by the way. Regardless, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to HIMediaTV. I have been your host, Evan from HIMediaTV. Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.